Back to the City Journal podcast. I'm your host, Charles Fain Lehman, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute and senior editor of City Journal. Joining me on the panel today, Ilya Shapiro, constitutional law guy at the Manhattan Institute, Daniel Martino, Argentinian politics expert at the Manhattan Institute, apparently, and Tal Fortgang, legal policy guy at the Manhattan. So, Tal works for Ilya, so Tal, don't mess this up. Otherwise, it'll come back in your review.
But by works for me, that means he writes a bunch of stuff. I read a third of it and enjoy it. That's our professional relationship.
It's a good review. Tal, quote that. We have this on record. I want to take us into the big news of the day. Earlier this morning, I think I was asleep. But China and the United States announced a 90-day temporary reduction in the mutual tariffs. So they're down on the U.S. side from 145% to 30%. It's a major de-escalation. As we're recording this, the markets are up like 1,000 points, although God knows what will be happening by the time it comes out. So don't get mad at me, listeners, if it's changed. Daniel, where are we on this front? You're the econ guy on the panel. Is this a good development? Is this a bad development? What do you think?
I think the Chinese negotiation team probably knows more about what the U.S. wants than we do. At this point, I don't know what's the goal of U.S. policy with the tariffs on China. If the goal was decoupling from China, then you should have wanted to keep the tariffs, not lift them. And if the goal was to get them to lower the tariffs, well, now we have higher tariffs than we did before. So it seems like, at least by those two very different goals that are exclusionary from each other, we aren't achieving anything.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a messy situation. Ilya, I know you're not an econ guy, but I'm curious for your perception as, an American consumer.
Hey, I took both
where do you think they're going?
And 102 in college, so.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case.
Ilya is from a socialist country. I'm from Canada, so he has a lot of experience.
Well, coming from the Soviet Union to Canada now here, the damn socialism keeps following me around, so I don't know where next to go. But what I want to know is when I can start looking at my 401k again.
Yeah, today would be a good day for it, all things considered.
Yeah, I'll log in. I haven't, it's been about a month and a half. I'm like, I have a long time horizon. I'll just wait for that dip to rebound up, just like after COVID, and I don't know.
Yeah, so let me ask you a little bit. I mean, do you have a perception of the politics of this stuff? I mean, it seems like, there's, as Daniel was alluding to, there's been a great deal of back and forth. Do you think that this is likely to be a détente? What's your model of Trump and how people are going to respond to this?
Well, politically, it's about him appearing to get a better deal for America. We can, I'll defer to Daniel whether it is a better deal than what we had before with China or with anyone else, and to create jobs. So. Part of this is actually what's on the ground. Part of it is vibes. And if he can keep pointing to these successes, then politically that's good. But we'll see. The devil is in the details in terms of small businesses being affected, supply chains, whether stuff is indeed cheaper for people across the board, not just pencils and dolls and these sorts of sound bites, but do people feel that there's less inflation? Do people feel like they're getting quality items for a reasonable price while America's manufacturing base, however that's reconstituted in the 2020s and 2030s, whether indeed that springs back?
Yeah, one of the big questions here, Daniel, I think, is about sort of tariff uncertainty. That even the bigger damage than imposing a tax is the rapid fluctuations in what tariff policy is. I mean, do you have a sense of, what one argument here is that even that though the tariffs have been ratcheted back, the possibility of their reinstatement in the next 90 days is going to make everyone very wary. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and I was actually just thinking about that while you were talking, because there might be a lot of uncertainty over the next 4 years of the Trump administration, but perhaps the market doesn't think the future post-Trump is uncertain. And the future post-Trump, meaning the long run, right, is the most important future and an expectation for any investment, right? Because most investments are looking beyond the 4-year time frame. So perhaps they think, regardless of what happens with all this craziness now, we better invest, do our things now, maybe buy the dip. And, maybe the tax cuts will be extended, which is what's permanent. And, Trump won't be president after this term. Republicans will probably lose if they screw up with the tariffs. So then the tariffs will come down. It will be stable, or at least not as uncertain. And perhaps then we actually can make investment decisions. I'm just thinking about that now. And I hope that's the case, because that would be best for the U.S. economy. I do worry that the uncertainty that we have introduced now is only harming us.
Daniel,
And
maybe
on the legal front, this is an opportunity for you to jump in, Tal. I don't know if you've been following this, but there have been lawsuits filed, both on whether the administration is properly using the International Economic Emergency Act, and whether that act in itself is an unconstitutional delegation of authority to the president over tariffs.
Yeah, I haven't been following that particular legal question that closely, but it does raise the sort of broader context in which this whole tariff discussion occurs, which is the ongoing Cold War with China. And so my question for Daniel was going to be, like, really the long-term consideration that we ought to be thinking about is this decoupling, this vaunted decoupling. What other tools are at our disposal? Is this just perhaps it's a clumsy use of the tools that are at our disposal?
Wait, decoupling, are we bringing in Gwyneth Paltrow? Wasn't she all about the conscious uncoupling, decoupling, something like that?
I don't know this.
Daniel, yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Tal.
No, I want to hear from Daniel.
Yeah.
No, he was asking about decoupling, whether the tariffs are a good tool. I mean, the tariffs are a good tool in that's a way to do decoupling. So that people understand, decoupling simply means, should the U.S. just not trade with China, right? Try to make us less dependent on them, because potentially, there could be a war with China. Well, there won't be a war with, say, Guatemala, right? And even if there was, it could be easily quashed, right? So I think, if you ask my policy preference is indeed decoupling from China. But to do that and not harm the economy in a massive way, because that would be the cost of decoupling financially, we would need to have total free trade with the rest of the world. And I am totally comfortable with free trade with the rest of the world, meaning zero tariffs, not 10%, not 5%, but zero. And that would be the only way really to compensate for the cost of cutting off trade with China. And it would harm China massively because, of course, it would harm us partially, the tariffs to China, but a lot of businesses move out of China to India, to Vietnam, to Thailand, to Mexico. And that's a good thing, right? Because those countries are not going to go to war with the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that gets back to the frenetic character of this. It's like, if the thesis here, which was the thesis, sort of after they rolled back the initial wave of tariffs, the thesis became, well, China's the real problem, and we are going to deal with China specifically, and we're going to push towards this sort of balanced China. And now it kind of seems like they blinked on that too, or at least they blinked short term. Maybe we end up.
Is it a blink, or is it a getting what we wanted all along?
What did we
what
want
is what
all
we
along?
want?
I don't know. That's why I'm earnestly asking the question. Like,
maybe behind the scenes there's a deal.
Well, also there's the U.S.-UK deal, which apparently puts tariff levels back to what they were originally.
Not really, 10%.
Is that higher than it was before?
Yes, before we had almost no tariffs on the UK.
Huh.
So we have 30% tariffs against China now, 20%
what about
against the EU.
Rolls-Royces and Bentleys? Because apparently for a while there was higher tariffs on lower cost cars and lower tariffs on luxury cars. Is that still the case?
Well, Ilya, your
don't know.
401k may be recovering. It's not recovering that well.
I think Ilya is asking for. I think Ilya wants to buy a Rolls Royce, and so he was thinking about when's the best time.
My wife did authorize me to buy a sports car by my 50th birthday, which is coming up in 2 years. So I'll be in the market soon.
You got to wait until the tariffs. Actually, that's a good opportunity to take us out. Because really, what I wanted to ask is, in I don't know, gosh, 91 days, are the tariff rates going to be higher or lower than 30%? This is very important because Ilya may be trying to buy one of those new Chinese electric cars at BYD, but a sporty one. So everyone needs a very practical projection for Ilya's sake. Uh, I mean, but this gets also to this sort of question of like tariff uncertainty. What the heck is happening? Tal, what's your best guess? 91 days from now, the deal's lapsed. Are they going back up? Are they settling down to the current level? Or are they going lower?
What the hell do I know, Charles? I mean, what the hell do any of us know about this this
Wait, I want to know if
administration?
there's a market for tariff futures, like
Yes.
that you can put puts and calls and all of those kinds of options. That might be the making exotic financial instruments great again.
That's
There
that you're
is, Ilya, there is, but it's already perfectly efficient. There's already been enough information input. You can't beat it. Uh, Look, I'm sure there'll be some intervening events where that will cause the Trump administration to lurch one way and then another. So, I mean, if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say we keep watching the markets rise. We try to keep conditions as stable as possible until the next thing comes in and throws a wrench into the whole thing.
But
fair. Okay.
isn't it the case that as Daniel was saying earlier, kind of not just the uncertainty, but the lack of apparent overall strategy that is counterproductive to whatever the ultimate strategy is, if there is one, because it seems like we get conflicting information about what the goals of all of these policies are, and then it's hard to evaluate whether they're effective. Markets can't efficiently price that in short or long term.
I will.
Well,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was checking
Wait,
on the
Daniel, I want to hear
market.
your projections, but go ahead.
Well, I was checking on the market as Ilya and Tal were talking about. And so Polymarket, which is illegal to bet from the US, but is very widely used worldwide, um, does have a market on whether Trump would lower tariffs, but he already settled because he just did based on his last deal. And there's another one on Kalshi, which all of us can bet from the United States. And it says, will Trump end his tariffs against China? So the ones he imposed originally at the beginning of his term, will he end them? There is an over 60% chance he will do it before the end of the year, according to bettors.
Okay.
But that still means about a third chance left that it continues, according to what people predict. I think the chances of them going to pre-Trump levels are overestimated in this model. So based on that pricing, I would bet against the Kalshi odds. Um, I think the tariffs will be probably higher after 90 days. I think they will say that the deal didn't work out, the pause, we're going to go back up, and then the negotiations will continue. That's kind of how Trump is. But
See,
maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
I have
I think
I have an update for my portfolio. Just today, I'm up 2.3%.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to say the amount, and I'm like, don't do
yeah.
that on the
No,
Look at it.
podcast.
Look at it over the long term. It's enough to buy the German sports car now.
Bad news for all of us on Ilya.
no.
Yeah, I guess my suspicion is that they really are more scared of the bond markets than they want to admit, and so this is part of a broader strategy of slowly rolling back. So Scott Bessent is in control, and we're all with him in spirit. Go Scott, go! I want to turn us over even more Trump-related news, even more econ-related news. Sorry, lawyers. But there's sort of an interesting angle here. The president, Donald Trump, in a late-night truth on Truth Social, promised to sign an executive order to cut prescription drug prices to be in line with those paid by other nations. This stuck out to me as a story because drug pricing mandates are something that appeared during the Biden administration. On the other hand, they're very interesting because they are extraordinarily popular with most voters. Putting caps on drug prices is one of those things where, like, the right is on the wrong side of the electorate. So, I wonder how people think about the politics of this, independent of the the economic wisdom of it. First, I want to ask Daniel's opinion. What do you make of the economic wisdom of this?
Oh, well, this is curious because it does deal with a problem that is real, which is that other countries are indeed ripping off American drug companies, and American consumers are subsidizing the rest of the world by paying high drug prices that then go for cheap in the rest of the world. Now, that means there is no innovation abroad, but they don't care because all the innovation comes from America. The problem is that if America also rips off the drug companies, then there will be no innovation anywhere in the world because we are where that innovation comes from. And so that is the whole advantage of having, patents, right? And monopoly pricing is to encourage innovation. And so I'm not sure what the executive order will say. I'm not sure how it will be implemented to tell you what the effect will be. I will say, though, you mentioned that it's popular because price controls on drugs are popular, but price controls on anything is popular, Charles. If we were to poll the American people, should we make bread cheaper? If the government, should the president of the United States unilaterally lower egg prices, the people will say yes, even though it's a terrible policy.
Yeah, Tal, I wanna
Well,
pull
I
you in
hear
here.
we're gonna be
Uh,
importing drugs from Canada though, and that's the secret strategy for linking the economy and
But I
eventually
thought
taking it
imports were
over.
bad and they take our jobs, Ilya. So we're going to
But
destroy our
if Canada
hardworking
becomes
manufacturing industry of
part of the
pharmaceuticals?
U.S., then that eliminates any trade deficit.
and then we get their socialized insulin.
Nice.
It'll be
No,
perfect.
it's funny. It's funny how this logic makes no sense because they say imports are bad, but then if we import cheap drugs, that's good, even though it supposedly would destroy jobs of the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals in America. I mean, these people don't know what they're saying.
Tell us how you really feel. Tal, I'm gonna make you sound off on this topic. I mean, this is part of the president's strategy. Think about this, like, his commitment to not cutting Medicare and Social Security. He's willing to sort of like turn left on economic issues in order to consolidate his base and sort of facilitate his broadly popular right-wing cultural issues. Do you see this as part of that strategy? Do you think that's a good thing? How do as a conservative, how do you think about these developments?
Yeah, I definitely do see it as part of a broader strategy, largely catering, I think, to his geriatric base. It's of a piece with him talking about it. We're not going to touch your Social Security. We're not going to touch your Medicare. We're not going to touch your Medicaid, right? And many tens of billions of dollars of Medicaid go to elderly Americans, and these are some of the biggest Trump, small dollar amount donors. This is a huge part of the new Republican coalition. As a conservative, it's a very disconcerting thing to see price controls because you know about the inefficiencies that they create, and Daniel alluded to some of those. I do wonder how free the drug price market was before, right? To the extent that prices are supposed to be a signal, and we want to leave that signal intact as a form of accumulated systemic knowledge. I don't know to what extent the prices that we have without this intervention are that organic signal. So I'm not ready to raise five alarms and say this is like the worst kind of price control necessarily, but I'm still very, very skeptical.
I have a question.
It's a good point, Tal. And I'll say I want to give a shout out to the research of one of our colleagues, Chris Pope, because part of the reason, and he is the actual health economist expert on this, I'll say, not me. That's not my specific area of economics. But I'll say one of the motivating factors for Trump's order is that it's not that they're really ripping off the consumer in America, they're ripping off the government that pays for most of the drug spending in America. And that is through Medicare and Medicaid prescription drugs. And the reality is that a significant part of our budget deficit is explained by drug prices. And our colleague Chris Pope says that there's really a quick fix you can do to slow the growth of entitlements without cutting them. And that is that you should stop Medicare and Medicaid from covering new drugs from now on. Right now, Medicare and Medicaid cover the latest treatment, no matter what it is, at whatever price. And if you simply say, we're going to cover all the drugs that exist until now, 2025, but not the new ones. We're not going to cover the GLP-1 weight loss drug prescription like the Biden administration wanted because you want to feel better. You should pay it on your own dime. And so that is a big thing that we could do to reduce demand for drugs that increase the price.
I wanna ask one more angle on this, and I wanna go to Ilya, which is that this is sort of part of a broader trend in the administration of policy making through the executive, and he's been pretty aggressive about it, uh, in a way that has until recently been typical of Democratic presidents, Barack Obama, Joe Biden. I think even Congress was involved in attempting to facilitate Medicare price negotiations under the last administration. So, I mean, do you see this as part of that broader trend? And what do you make of the broader trend of most of the policymaking being done through the executive in this administration? What do you think is going on there? And that's partly a legal question in addition to being a political question.
I don't think it's just Democratic presidents or Democrats plus Trump. I mean, it's just a ratcheting up that as Congress is increasingly unable to pass much of anything, both due to narrow margins in the House and the filibuster in the Senate, that's what we've had with the what got characterized under Obama as pen and phone governance. Now we have pen and phone and tweet or truth or what have you. Um, I was reading that in the first 100 days of this administration, Congress passed 7 bills, which is the lowest ever. So maybe we are, spiraling further in that direction. And it's not just a matter of this president, wanting to act like a dictator and rule by executive order. That's just the way things are, and the courts are left to sort out with whether pushing the envelope is breaking through the envelope. I don't think it's a good thing as far as democratic accountability goes. I also don't think it's a durable thing, right? Because if you live by the executive order, you die by the executive order, and so we have these rapid swings, which is not good for long-term planning of the personal or business variety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common theme with the prior issue. I
That should be
wanna.
the quote of this episode. If you live by the executive order, you die by the executive order.
It's a good title. I wanna. Okay, I was gonna ask
The
people.
other thing I should have mentioned when Tal was starting to talk about the Trump's geriatric base. I mean, is it a geriatric base? I mean, we have the vibe that the kids are now becoming more based or what have you. And the funny thing I read, so this isn't my idea, but I thought it was clever that with the kind of industrial policy or kind of populist economics, what have you, what we have is a convergence on economics just with different pronouns based on whether you're on the left or the right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Two economically far left parties with different pronouns.
Right.
I was gonna ask people about medical innovation. I'm not sure we have a strong opinion on that, so I want to ask instead actually about popularity. The president's popularity has sort of been in a steady decline since Liberation Day, sort of before that, but I think it's took a noted decline around Liberation Day, because everyone got too tired of winning, I think. So I want to ask people,
I
do
mean,
we
he was
think that
doing
this?
really well, right? He had
Yeah.
positive things
Some of
and
it, some
then
of it, some of it was the honeymoon, and we expected that to come down. But he's the least
there is
popular
no honeymoon
president.
anymore. He was just doing things that were popular.
The only president who is less popular at this point in his term is the first Trump presidency. So he's doing better than himself last time. And other than that, not so great in the modern presidential era. So I'm going to ask: is this going to benefit? We were talking about the popularity of this proposal. Is this going to benefit Trump's popularity at all? Is this a play to pull him out of the popularity tailspin? Daniel, what's your take?
I think this will be popular, and this will actually reduce truck prices in the short run. It will just come at an immense cost in the long run. But remember, politicians do not care about the long run. They care about the next 2 or 4 years. So this is going to be politically beneficial, even if it's going to be economically harmful.
Tal, what's your take? You think you agree? You disagree?
I hardly have my finger on the pulse of the American people. I've never tried to be a
Really?
populist, but Daniel's analysis seems to be correct to me. I mean, there's a lot of just resentment for big pharma and all it stands for, and anything that could be seen as sticking it to them is going to be popular, not just among the people who stand to benefit, so to speak, but from younger people who feel like perhaps they've been sold a bill of goods about the nature of the economy, and big pharma always gets roped into those kinds of corkboard conspiracy theories about who's rigging the game. So I expect a bit of a boost in popularity again to be displaced by the next story, whatever it is.
I really have nothing to add to that. I think that's right. Lower prices on something like prescription drugs is a very popular thing, and of course, we're not going to see the innovation that's not produced 5 years from now because of it.
Maybe you live by American medical innovation and you die by Canadian medical imports, because I'm pretty sure those are the drugs that they're using most up there
I think that
are not
slogan is going to
exactly
have to be
life-saving.
workshop. Doesn't exactly drip off the tongue.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm forced to agree with the consensus. I try really hard not to, but I mean, I think it will be a bump. I think it'll be a relatively small bump. I'm not sure we'll be able to pick it up in the polling, and that's depends on what the policy actually looks like. That's the big question. But not thrilled about the suppression of innovation. Um, Before we go, I want to turn to some lighter-hearted news. Good news out of the Vatican last week. Pope Leo XIV, formerly Cardinal Robert Prevost, was elected the 268th Pope, 267th Pope, by the Papal Conclave. It was a
And the
relatively
first
fast conclave.
American, USA,
He's the
USA.
first American. Well, so my Latin American friends have been scolding me for this. They're like, he's the first U.S. American Pope. He's not the first American Pope. The whole
But
of
also,
Americas.
he's the first Peruvian pope too, we should
He's
say,
also
because
the
he
first.
is a Peruvian citizen. He naturalized Peruvian. He lived there for like 40 years. I think more years in Peru than in the United States, actually.
Well, but
Uh,
there was just a clip coming out that's saying when they were both lower down in the hierarchy of the church, he did not get along well with Pope Francis. So there was some.
that's true.
Right. Well, and it's a very interesting election. I think there's a lot we don't know about how the new pope is going to position himself, but I am very happy, as Ilya said, to have an American in the Vatican, because everywhere is better if it's run by an American. So I'm going to ask everybody. The Pope is from Chicago. Before you're out, I'm going to ask everybody
To
what
be
is the
clear,
one.
a White Sox fan, not a Cubs fan.
Right. So we'll get there. He's a White Sox fan. What is the one Chicago affectation, tradition, or character that you would like to see the Pope bring to the Vatican? Ilya, I will start with you.
Lots of flavors on the food that's served there. I like the Chicago hot dogs with all those toppings.
Garden style. Yeah,
Yeah.
which where you put everything on it. I once had a friend send me like a make your own garden style hot dogs pack. It worked very well, unfortunately. Um, Tal, what's the Chicagoism you would like to see brought to the Vatican?
Man, I haven't trafficked in Midwestern stereotypes in at least a couple of weeks, so I'm a little rusty here. I did want just to go back to the White Sox thing for a second, given that the new pope is an American League devotee. I did want to ask his position on the designated hitter. I take it that this is a moot point now that the NL has adopted the DH as well, which hurts me deeply. I guess
As long
I'd
as
want to
he
know.
and Trump can get together and get rid of that ghost runner in extra innings, that'll be enough.
That's true. I have no doubt that God himself wants us to do that. Both to banish ghosts generally and like to stop abominations from taking over our institutions. But just as far as Chicago affectations go, I love a good Chicago accent, car, fire, etc. I'd like to know how that translates to
Pope.
Latin. Well, you know what? Can't say it any better than that.
All right, Daniel, and I feel bad because I was like, I want to talk at the Pope, but it's going to be three Jews and Daniel, the actual observant Catholic.
Yes.
I was like, we're gonna be respectful
But
of
let
Pope.
me
We
tell
like
you
Pope.
about my Chicagoism. Let me tell you
Yeah,
about my
yeah, yeah.
Chicagoism
Please.
first. He needs to bring dip dish pizza to the Vatican to be scolded by all the Italians. I think it would be epic to bring all like the terrible American pizza, I should say, relative to
Speaking of which,
Italian.
apparently Giordano's is opening up a restaurant in DC, so we're gonna have some deep dish.
Cool. I've had deep dish. Remember, I actually lived in the Midwest. I went to school in Indiana. I visited Chicago many times. I love the Midwest. I hope he brings in some of the Midwest politeness, where when you bump into someone, you say "oop." That's the Midwestern response. I'm not sure if
In
in the big
Canada,
city
we
of the
say
Midwest,
sorry.
Chicago, they are like that. But so that's what I would say for that. And then I would say also, just for the Catholic part, look, I think there's many good signs of who the Pope is going to be. He just gave his speech explaining why he chose the name Leo XIV. And of course, it was because of Leo XIII, who was the Pope who in the late 19th century wrote Rerum Novarum, which is the most important Catholic papal encyclical that explains the Catholic social doctrine of essentially what the role of government should be in society. And it's really good. It's greatly denounces socialism. He also wrote Quod Apostolici Muneris, which is the papal encyclical that, before any country had attempted socialism, denounced it as essentially a genocidal ideology that was going to happen, everything that actually did occur. And then he mentioned that the new industrial revolution that he's trying to respond to is that of technology and AI and all these things. And I think it's very important for the church that guides us to speak about, for example, all the phenomena that are happening with technology that are really new, and we do need spiritual guidance about it. We were talking, I remember the other day in our Manhattan Institute meeting, how with like the AI bots, like some people are like falling in love with AI bots. Like these are deep spiritual issues that
There's a
show
movie
lack
with
of meaning, connection that the church needs to speak about.
there was a movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson
Yes,
15
her.
years ago about this.
Yes.
The use of reproductive technology to pick the eye color of your children, like how all these technologies are going to advance and really deform what the proper role of society, of government, of technology, of everything in our lives is something that the Pope needs
Daniel,
to
since you mentioned the
speak about.
Pope picking his name and the significance of Leo, can the Pope, like, what are the rules? I'm sure our listeners are really going to be interested in because it comes every time there's a new Pope. I'm like, he just gets to pick his name. Is there like
Regnal name.
is it
He
a
actually
certified
does get to
list?
pick his name. He could have picked any name,
Yeah.
really.
It's
Ideally, it's that of a biblical name, someone in the Bible or things like that. Francis was the first Francis, Pope Francis. And I also say it's really cool how the Pope is himself somebody who lived in Latin America, in addition to being an American, born and raised, all of that. He has a really interesting background. The media is picking on his brothers and stuff like that, and on his statements on immigration. But
His Twitter
I'm
feed.
actually hopeful.
I will just say I would be happy to have either the Pope or the Pope's brother on the Citational podcast. As for the Chicago thing, I would like him to bring to the Vatican. Ideally, he would bring Mayor Brandon Johnson to the Vatican so that Chicagoans would not have to deal with him anymore. I think that would be a great service. Pope Leo, if you're listening, please help out your home city. I assume, of course, because he's an American, he's a listener to the Citational podcast.
I
Speaking of,
hope he comes. I hope he comes to America.
that would be great. Speaking of listeners to the Citational podcast, listeners, that's about all the time we have. Thank you, as always, to our panelists. Thank you to our producer, Isabel Regi. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, or even if you haven't, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, whatever else you're supposed to do on YouTube and all other platforms. Leave us comments and questions down below. We might eventually even answer some of them if you leave us them. Until next time, you've been listening to the City Journal Podcast. I hope you'll join us again soon.